I clicked the main entry in my wildlife journal, dated June 3rd. Third season, first cougar sighting. Right on schedule. The big cat stood at the edge of the clearing below my tower, its tan fur lit up in the morning sun. I'd named her Dot during my first summer on Baker Peak because of the weird black spot on her right shoulder. She looked up at me with that same curious stare she always had, like she was trying to figure out what I was doing in her territory. "Morning to you too," I said, lifting my coffee mug in a small salute. I sat down in my swivel chair and opened my notebook to record the sighting. My handwriting had gotten neater over the years, one of the unexpected benefits of isolation. Time to practice penmanship when you're the only human for 20 miles in any direction. June 3rd, 5:47 a.m., Dot at Northeast Clearing, third consecutive season return. Appeared healthy, good weight, no visible cubs. Watched tower for approximately 6 minutes before heading north into Douglas Fir Stand. The radio crackled. "Baker Peak, this is headquarters. Morning check-in, over." I picked up the handset. "Headquarters, Baker Peak here. All clear. Weather conditions stable. 62 degrees, winds light from southwest, humidity 58%. No smoke visible in any quadrant. Over." "Copy that, Baker Peak," came Dan Mitchell's voice. "Supply run scheduled for next Monday. Need anything special?" Over. "Negative, headquarters. Standard resupply is fine." Over. "Roger that. Have a quiet one. Headquarters out." I hung up the handset and went back to the window. My third season as a fire lookout had started just like the others. Quiet, normal, and exactly how I wanted it. The Olympic National Forest was all around me. Deep green trees with a few rocky spots and meadows breaking it up. From Baker Peak, I could see nearly 30 miles when it was clear. The tower itself wasn't much. A 16 by 16 foot cabin on stilts with windows on all sides. But it was mine, at least from June through September. The living space was small but worked fine. A narrow bed against one wall, a small kitchen area with a 2-burner propane stove, a desk for my journals, and shelves with books I'd hauled up at the start of the season. A chair, small table, and chest for clothing finished it off. I did my first scan of the day, checking each section through my binoculars. The firefinder, basically a circular map with sighting tools, sat in the middle of the room, ready to spot the exact location of any smoke I might see. This early in the season, fires rarely happened, but staying alert was part of the job. After my scan, I made breakfast, oatmeal with dried berries and a second cup of coffee. I ate by the east window, looking at the morning sun on the mountains. Most people couldn't handle this job. The loneliness made them quit after a few weeks, if they even made it that long. The Forest Service had trouble keeping lookouts staffed. That's partly why I got the job, even though I had no experience before. 3 years ago, I needed to escape from a life I couldn't stand anymore. The mountains gave me what I needed: quiet, alone time, and something useful to do. My day fell into its usual pattern. Every hour, I looked over my whole area. Between checks, I read my current book, a biography of John Muir, did some sketching, and updated my weather log. I kept better records than I needed to, tracking weather patterns year to year. By midday, the temperature hit 72 degrees. I opened all the windows to get some air flowing and changed into just a t-shirt. The fire danger board outside my tower still said low, normal for early June. But that would change as summer went on. After my noon radio check-in, I got out my sketchbook and worked on drawing the Western Ridge. I was never good at art, but 2 seasons of practice had made me better. I liked trying to draw how the nearby dark green trees looked blue-gray in the distance. A red-tailed hawk flew in circles above the valley. I watched it through my binoculars as it glided around. The wildlife was part of why I loved this job. Last season, I'd counted 17 types of birds, 4 kinds of deer, tons of smaller animals, and of course, Dot the cougar. My personal journal had way more stuff than my official reports, just things I noticed that mattered to me. I ate lunch, crackers with peanut butter and an apple, while still keeping an eye out for smoke. Early season was mostly about getting into habits that would be automatic when fire danger got worse. July and August would bring lightning strikes and the occasional careless camper. That's when the job really mattered. The afternoon was quiet. I cleaned the windows inside and out to get rid of any marks that might look like smoke from far away. I swept the floor, fixed up my bookshelf, and tightened a loose hinge on one of the cabinets. As evening came, I did my final scans of the day as the valleys got darker. Dinner was simple: pasta with dried vegetables and some canned chicken. I ate outside on the catwalk around the tower as the stars started coming out. Before it got completely dark, I went through my evening routine, locking up the tower, checking supplies, writing down the day's weather info, and making my final radio call to headquarters. The night operator answered my all clear with their usual short reply. I brushed my teeth using water from my storage tank, then got into bed with my headlamp and book. I could hear the night sounds through the open windows, an owl calling sometimes, wind in the trees, and a quiet you just don't get anymore where most people live. As I turned off my light, I looked at the dark sky full of stars. In a few weeks, fire season would really start, with longer days and more responsibility. But right now, I had this total alone time, miles from anyone else, where normal everyday worries just didn't matter. The simple life here still surprised me sometimes. Wake up, watch for smoke, report conditions, fix stuff, sleep, repeat. Most people would find it boring. To me, it was peaceful. The same isolation that made others leave had fixed me in ways I didn't know I needed. I fell asleep hearing the tower creak in the night breeze, happy knowing tomorrow would be more of what I wanted. Alone time, something useful to do, and the Olympic mountains all around me. 2 weeks into July, the usual routine of fire season finally kicked into high gear. The temperature had been climbing steadily for days, turning the tower into something close to an oven, even with all my windows open for airflow. I'd changed into a tank top and shorts, keeping a bandana soaked in cool water around my neck as I did my midday lookout. The eastern valley looked different today. A weird heat haze hung over everything, making the far-off trees look wavy and blurry. I wrote it down in my log. Strange air conditions, probably connected to the storm heading our way from the northwest. The weather report said thunderstorms by evening, which always kept me extra watchful. Lightning strikes started most fires in this part of the forest. I kept looking around in all directions, noting that I could only see a moderate distance because of the haze. That's when I noticed movement at the tree line, about a mile from the tower. Bear, I muttered to myself, making a quick note of the location. Black bears were common enough in this area, especially during berry season. I kept looking around my area, checking everything before writing it all down in my notebook. After I finished, I looked back to where I'd seen something move earlier. I picked up my binoculars without thinking much about it, figuring the bear had just walked away or was eating something near the edge of the clearing. What I saw made me freeze. The thing had come at least 30 yards closer to the tower, way too fast for a bear looking for food. I tried to get a better look through my binoculars, squinting to see clearer through the heat. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't anything I knew. The thing was standing straight up at the edge of the forest. Tall, really tall, at least 7 feet. It looked kind of human-shaped, but in a wrong way. Its arms and legs seemed too long and skinny for its body, like a kid's drawing where everything's the wrong size. It was too far to see its face, but I just knew it was staring right at me. I put down the binoculars and rubbed my eyes. When I looked again without them, I could still see the dark shape just standing there at the edge of the trees. "What the hell are you?" I whispered. I looked through the binoculars again. The figure hadn't moved, but it seemed like it was just standing there on purpose, like it was waiting and watching. I put down the binoculars and took out my journal. My hand was shaking, but I tried to keep it steady while I wrote down what I saw. July 15th, 12:37 p.m. Unidentified figure at eastern tree line, approx. 1 mile from tower. Initial movement suggested wildlife, bear, but now appears to be humanoid, estimated height 7+ feet, extremely thin build with disproportionate limbs, remaining stationary at forest edge, possibly unauthorized hiker. Unusual physical characteristics may be distorted by heat haze. When I did a quick sketch to show the weird shape of the figure, my drawing looked like a kid made it, but it was all I could do with my shaky hands and bad drawing skills. I tried to think of normal explanations. Maybe a lost hiker, even though nobody should be in this part of the forest, or someone wearing a backpack or gear that made them look strange from far away. The distance and heat waves could be making it hard to see clearly, but something in my gut told me this was dangerous. My whole body felt on edge. I grabbed the radio, keeping my eyes on the figure. "Headquarters, this is Baker Peak. Come in. Over." The radio crackled with static. I tried again. "Headquarters, Baker Peak here. Possible unauthorized individual in Section E7. Requesting confirmation if any personnel are in the area. Over." More static, broken up by occasional fragments of words that cut in and out. The approaching storm was probably messing up communications, something that happened a few times each season. I set the radio down and picked up the binoculars again. The figure still wasn't moving. I checked my watch. I'd first spotted it nearly 20 minutes ago, and it hadn't moved since taking those steps closer to the tower. For the next hour, I switched between my regular duties and checking on the figure. It stayed in the exact same position, not moving at all that I could see. No normal person stands completely still for that long. I tried the radio several more times with the same result, just static and broken fragments. At the 2-hour mark, I was watching through the binoculars when the figure finally moved. It turned, almost mechanically, and stepped back into the tree line. Within seconds, it had disappeared into the shadows beneath the trees. I took a deep breath and felt my tight shoulders. My head was starting to hurt at the base of my skull. The rest of the afternoon passed with me being extra alert. I checked the tree line every few minutes, but the figure didn't show up again. I tried to focus on my regular duties, hourly scans, weather readings, logbook entries, but I was distracted and jumpy. By late afternoon, the approaching storm was visible on the horizon, a dark wall of clouds moving slowly toward Baker Peak. The air felt charged and heavy. I knew I should eat something, but I wasn't hungry anymore. Instead, I drank water and tried to calm my nerves. "You've been alone too long," I told myself. "Your mind is playing tricks." But I couldn't forget the weird shape of the person or how sure I was that it was watching me. I made one last try to radio headquarters before the storm hit. "Headquarters, Baker Peak, radio check. Having some communication issues. Please advise on weather conditions and any personnel in Section E7. Over." This time, instead of pure static, I got fragments of a response, but nothing clear enough to understand. I'd have to try again after the storm passed. As the sun began to set, the sky turned a deep, unnatural crimson. The whole forest below me looked like it was covered in red light. I'd seen plenty of amazing sunsets from the tower, but this was different. The color was too strong, making everything look blood red. Thunder rolled in the distance as I went through my evening routine extra carefully. I checked the locks on the door and windows, then checked them again. I made sure my flashlights had fresh batteries and that my emergency radio was charged. The handheld weather radio confirmed what I already knew. Bad thunderstorms coming, expected to last through the night. I heated a can of beef stew on my small propane stove, but only managed a few bites before pushing it aside. My eyes kept going to the windows, searching the darkening forest below. As night fell, I stood at the east window, looking out at the spot where I'd seen the figure. The forest had disappeared into darkness, with only the occasional flash of distant lightning lighting up the landscape for a split second. In those brief flashes, the trees looked like they were moving, their shapes changed by wind and shadows. But nothing tall and thin came out from the tree line. Nothing with impossibly long limbs stood watching my tower. I took out my journal one last time before bed. July 15th, 9:16 p.m. Figure not seen since 2:42 p.m. when it went back into forest. Radio communication with headquarters disrupted by storm coming in. Weird sunset. Deep red color everywhere I could see. Storm expected overnight. All tower security measures checked and double-checked. I closed the journal and set it on my desk, next to the binoculars. The first heavy raindrops began to hit the windows as I turned off the main lights, leaving only my small reading lamp by the bed. I couldn't shake the image of the figure from my mind, or the uncomfortable feeling that stuck with me even hours after it had disappeared. The feeling of being watched from below. I'd chosen this job for the solitude, the independence, the separation from other people. For the first time in 3 seasons, I found myself wishing I wasn't quite so alone on top of Baker Peak. The storm arrived just after I finished my final patrol around the tower's interior. Rain pounded against the windows like someone throwing handfuls of gravel, while wind howled through the surrounding pines. I double-checked the locks on every window, testing each latch with a firm tug. The main door's deadbolt slid into place with a satisfying thunk that I found oddly comforting. My usual evening routine took twice as long tonight. I placed my flashlights strategically around the small space, one by the bed, another near the desk, a third on the counter next to my hunting knife. The rifle stayed propped in the corner, loaded but with the safety on. Standard precaution during storm season, I told myself. Nothing to do with what I'd seen earlier. Lightning flashed, lighting up the tower in stark white bursts that left purple afterimages floating across my vision. In those split-second glimpses, the forest below looked weird and strange. Thunder followed almost immediately, a deafening crack that made the whole structure tremble. The storm was directly overhead now. "Just weather," I said aloud, my voice sounding thin beneath the drumming rain. I heated water for tea, hoping it might calm my nerves enough for sleep. My hands kept finding reasons to check the door lock again, to look through rain-streaked windows into the dark night. The rational part of my brain knew I was being ridiculous. The deeper animal part wasn't convinced. The teacup warmed my palms as I sat on my bed, back against the wall, watching the storm blow outside. My weather radio buzzed with updates about the system moving through. Severe thunderstorm warnings for the entire region, expected to continue through early morning. I turned off all lights except for the small battery-powered lantern beside my bed. The blue glow made weird shadows across the ceiling as I lay back, still fully dressed. Sleep seemed impossible with my pulse jumping at every crack of thunder, every groan of the tower swaying in the wind. But tiredness eventually won out. The constant background noise of rain faded into white noise, and I drifted into restless sleep. I woke up suddenly sometime later, confused and immediately on edge. My watch read 2:07 a.m. The storm had weakened to a steady rainfall, no longer the violent downpour from earlier. Wind still gusted occasionally, making the tower creak and settle, but something else had woken me. I sat completely still, listening. There, a faint scratching sound, subtle at first, then more deliberate. It came from the window on the east side of the tower. "Branch," I whispered, trying to convince myself. The pines grew tall around Baker Peak, and in strong winds, limbs could easily scrape against the tower. I grabbed the flashlight next to my bed, turned it on, and pointed it at the window. The rain made it hard to see outside, turning the glass into a dark, wavy surface. I couldn't see anything except my reflection. The scratching stopped, then started again at the north window. My heart beat faster. No tree was close enough to that side of the tower to reach the windows. I moved to the middle of the room, slowly turning to follow the sound as it went from one window to another. It wasn't random or caused by wind. It seemed like something was doing it on purpose. Then I heard something new. Heavy footsteps walking around the bottom of my tower. The slow, steady beat was too regular to be any animal I knew. Whatever was walking down there had a pattern to its steps, a 3-beat step that stopped between rounds. Thump, thump, thump. Pause, thump, thump, thump. Pause. I backed up against the firefinder in the middle of the room, staying the same distance from all windows. I could see my breath in front of my face. The temperature inside the tower had suddenly dropped. It was July, but now it was cold enough that I could see my breath. The footsteps changed direction. Instead of going around, they moved to the staircase that wrapped around the outside of the tower. The metal steps made dull sounds as something heavy walked up, each step hitting with clear weight. Thump, thump, pause. Thump, thump, pause. I grabbed my rifle from the corner, my hands sweaty against the wooden stock. The steps kept coming up, getting closer to the door with each second. I tried to count how many steps were left, 15, 12, 10, but I lost count as I could hear my pulse in my ears. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. It was quiet for what felt like forever. I stood still, my rifle pointed at the entrance, waiting. All I could hear was the soft sound of rain and my own quick breathing. Then the doorknob moved. It turned slowly to the right, stopping when it hit the lock. After a pause, something pressed against the door, gently at first, then harder. The old wood made creaking sounds as something pushed from outside, testing how strong the hinges and frame were. The deadbolt stayed in place, but the door bent inward a little from the pressure. Whatever was on my porch was really strong. "Who's there?" I called, hating how my voice cracked. No answer came, but the pressure against the door got stronger. The hinges made a loud noise as the wood bent more. The small gap between door and frame got wider, letting me see darkness beyond, darker than the night should have been even with the storm. The scratching came back, this time right on the door, long, slow lines from top to bottom that didn't sound like fingernails or claws at all. It was more like something hard and sharp being dragged across the wood very carefully. I backed away until my legs hit the bed. My hand shook so badly I had to hold the rifle tighter so I wouldn't drop it. The scratching suddenly stopped, replaced by a single, hard hit against the middle of the door. The whole tower shook from the impact. Then another hit, and another. Each bang came at exact times, sounding like a huge fist demanding to be let in. Boom, boom, boom. The banging moved from the door to the windows, going around the tower in the same pattern as before. Each hit tested a different way to get in. The glass shook in its frames but stayed strong. These windows were built to handle mountain storms much worse than this. Through the wet glass, I saw bits of movement, a dark shape going from window to window. Too tall to be a person, too careful to be an animal. The same thing I'd seen at the edge of the forest, now going around my tower in circles. Hours went by with this scary pattern. The banging would stop for several minutes, long enough for me to think it had left, then start again somewhere else. The whole building shook with each hit. I didn't dare go near the windows, instead following the noise. My rifle pointed uselessly at whatever wall the sound came from. It got really cold until I could see my breath when I breathed out. My fingers went numb around the rifle, but I couldn't tell if it was from the cold or being scared. Around 4:30 a.m., the banging suddenly stopped. I waited, my muscles hurting from being tense for it to start again. Minutes turned into an hour with nothing but the soft sound of rain slowing down. Finally, light gray light started coming through the windows as the morning got closer. I didn't move until it was fully light inside the tower. My legs hurt when I finally took a slow step toward the east window. The forest looked calm below, the storm having passed during the night. There was no dark figure by the trees, nothing strange moving anywhere. I put the rifle down and went to the door, stopping with my hand on the lock. I was still scared about what might be outside. But daytime had always been safe before. I turned the lock and pulled the door open just enough to look out. The porch was empty. Rain dripped from the roof, the last bit of the night's storm. Stepping all the way outside, I walked around the outside path that went around my tower, looking at the ground below. What I saw made my stomach drop. Huge footprints went around the base of the tower. each print at least 18 inches long with weird-looking toes I'd never seen in any wildlife guide. The tracks went almost an inch deep into dirt that I knew was hard and tough to make marks in. The rain had partly filled them with water that shined in the morning light. I rushed down the stairs following the trail around the tower. Some tracks went right up to the windows where I found deep marks cut into the wooden frames, parallel lines in the wood like they were made by super sharp tools. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. These weren't from any animal that lives in the Olympic Mountains. They weren't human either. Just the distance between footprints, about 4 feet apart, meant whatever made them was incredibly tall. I ran back up to the tower and grabbed my camera, going back to take pictures of everything before the rain washed away the proof. My hands shook so much I had to hold the camera against my chest to keep the photos from being blurry. When I'd taken all the pictures I could, I went back to the tower and locked the door behind me. What I'd found was really scary. Something had come in the night. Something big enough and strong enough to make the whole tower shake when it hit. Something smart enough to try every way to get in. Something that had left tracks unlike anything I'd ever seen. I pulled the radio toward me, desperate to report what had happened. My hands shook as I pressed the microphone button, hoping the storm hadn't broken the equipment. I quickly grabbed the radio mic, my hands still shaky from what I'd found. The pictures I'd taken were spread across my desk, solid proof of something impossible moving around my tower during the night. Headquarters, Baker Peak, emergency, come in, over. Static hissed back at me, broken up by occasional bits of noise. I tried again, pressing the transmit button firmly. Headquarters, this is Baker Peak. I need to report a serious incident. Over. The radio crackled, then got clear enough to hear Dan Mitchell's voice through the static. Kerr Peak, this is headquarters. Having trouble with your signal. Repeat transmission. Over. I let out a breath, happy to finally reach someone. Dan, something was at my tower last night, something big. It tried to break in for hours. I've got footprints, scratches on the window frames. I need someone up here to see this. More static followed, then Dan's voice came back, clearer but still cutting out. Say again, you had a visitor? Not a person, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Something else. It left tracks around the base of the tower. Each print is at least 18 inches long. It tried every window, the door. It was systematic, Dan. I've got pictures. The silence went on for so long I thought we'd lost connection again. Finally, his voice came back, sounding tinny and far away. James, you've been up there alone for weeks now. Isolation plays tricks. This wasn't in my head, I cut in. I've got physical evidence. Deep scratches in the wood. Footprints bigger than anything that should be in these mountains. Baker Peak, we've had reports of increased bear activity following the storm. Probably a black bear, maybe disoriented by the weather. They can stand and reach windows if they smell food. Over. I stared at the radio in disbelief. Dan, I know what bear prints look like. These aren't. Look, James, he interrupted, his voice taking on a practiced, calming tone that only made me more frustrated. It's not uncommon for lookouts to experience some unease after prolonged isolation, especially after storms. The mind fills in gaps, makes ordinary things seem threatening. My fingers tightened around the microphone. I fired a gun in the Marines, Dan. I know the difference between imagination and reality. This thing was real. It was trying to get in. Static drowned out his response, leaving me with just fragments. Supplies in 3 days. Earliest we can. All units responding to lightning strikes near. Can't spare anyone right now. I waited for the interference to clear, counting my breaths to stay calm. Fire activity has us stretched thin, Dan continued when the connection stabilized. Reynolds Ridge had 2 small starts from lightning, and we've got 3 crews out on containment already. Just sit tight. If it was wildlife, it won't return to an area where it was threatened. And if it wasn't wildlife? I asked. Another long pause. Do you have enough ammo for your rifle? Yes. Keep it handy then. But James... His voice softened with what sounded like genuine concern. Most strange encounters have natural explanations. Get some rest. Take photos of anything unusual. We'll send the regular supply run in 3 days with extra provisions. I wanted to argue further, to make him understand the severity of what had happened, but the worsening static told me the connection was failing again. Baker Peak, headquarters going offline, maintain regular radio check-ins, out. The transmission ended, leaving me alone with the photos and my certainty that whatever had visited in the night was coming back. I spent the morning checking every possible way into the tower. The 4 large windows, north, south, east, and west, were all still in one piece, even after all the banging they'd taken overnight. The west window had the most damage to its frame, with deep scratch marks in the wood around the edges. It was also the oldest window, put in 2 seasons before the others during a repair. The seal around it had always been a bit worse, letting in cold air during winter. I added extra screws to each window latch, tightening everything I could find. The door got special attention. I made a quick brace using a shelf board wedged between the knob and the opposite wall. By noon, the forest below looked completely peaceful. Birds had come back to the trees around the tower, their calls making normal background noise. If I didn't have proof from the night before, I might have told myself nothing happened. But the photos didn't lie. Neither did the marks on the wood. I made lunch, canned soup heated on the propane stove, but only had a few bites before pushing it aside. I wasn't hungry anymore as I planned how to make it through another night. In the afternoon, I did maintenance tasks with new urgency. I moved my small table in front of the door as another barrier. I didn't have much furniture in the tower, but I put what I had between the windows and my bed to create obstacles. The hunting knife went under my pillow. I kept the rifle in my hands or right next to me. I checked my ammunition. 27 rounds for the rifle, more than enough for any normal threat. But I wasn't sure what counted as enough for whatever I was facing. As the sun started going down toward the western ridges, I filled every container I had with water. If I needed to stay locked in for days, water would be essential. My food supplies could last 2 weeks if I was careful. At 7 p.m., I made my standard radio check. Keeping to routine seemed important somehow, like something normal to hold on to. Headquarters, Baker Peak, evening check-in, no smoke, weather clear, temperature 65 degrees, dropping, visibility good in all quadrants, over. Only static answered. The storm must have damaged equipment somewhere along the relay. I'd try again later. It got dark really slowly that evening. I kept looking around at the tree line. Nothing moved except branches swaying in the light breeze. Night completely took over around 10 p.m. I kept a single small light on. A battery-powered lantern I could quickly turn off if needed. The rifle lay across my lap as I sat on the bed, back against the wall, facing the west window, the one with the broken seal. If something was going to try again, that seemed like the most likely way in. Time passed so slowly. The normal forest sounds, insects, the occasional call of a night bird, wind through pine needles, made everything seem peaceful. My watch read 11:58 p.m. when those sounds suddenly stopped. Everything went quiet on the mountain. Even the wind stopped, leaving a weird, empty silence that made my arms get goosebumps. Midnight came, marked by nothing but the soft glow of my watch face. 12:01 a.m. 12:02 a.m. Each minute felt so long as I tried to hear anything beyond the tower walls. The first impact came at 12:07 a.m., a powerful blow against the north wall that made the entire structure shake a little. The sound wasn't like a fist or any tool I recognized, more like something hard and heavy being swung against the outside with serious force. I raised the rifle, pointing it toward the north window, though nothing was visible through the glass. I was breathing quick and shallow and tried to control it. The next blow hit the east wall, then the south. then the west, working around the tower in a clockwise pattern. Careful, planned, testing. Between impacts, I heard movement. Heavy footsteps circling below, then climbing the outside stairs with that weird 3-beat rhythm I'd heard the night before. Thump, thump, thump. Pause. The tower got really cold really fast. Soon I could see my breath in front of my face, even though it was July. The cold was sudden and not normal, and it made me shake all over. I kept the rifle aimed at each window as the impacts moved around the tower. The glass rattled, but stayed in place. Whatever was out there seemed to be testing each possible way in very carefully. An hour into the attack, something new happened. From somewhere in the forest below, distant but clear, came a sound that terrified me. "Help me!" The voice sounded human, male, scared, yelling from the trees east of the tower. "Is anyone there? Help!" My first instinct was to respond, to look for someone in trouble. But something felt wrong. The voice sounded weird. The words didn't flow right, like someone trying to talk like a person but not quite getting it. The voice called again, this time from the west, which made no sense because it was too far away to have moved there so quickly. "I'm hurt. Please help me." Then from the north, "Hello? Is someone up there?" And finally, from directly below the tower, "James, James, let me in." This last call used my name, which made me feel sick to my stomach. The voice sounded more human now, but still off in ways I couldn't really explain. It was like listening to one of those computer voices that sounds almost real but isn't quite right. The banging started again, harder this time, focused on the west window, the oldest one with the bad seal. Each hit made the glass bend in a little, like it was testing how much it could take before breaking. By 2 a.m., whatever was out there tried something new. The hitting stopped, replaced by careful sounds at the edges of the west window. Scratching, pulling, like something working on the spots where the glass met the frame. I moved quietly across the room, making sure I had a good shot at the window. In the dark, I could see something moving at the bottom edge. Something picking at the weather stripping, taking out the material that sealed the window. This wasn't random violence. This was smart problem solving. The radio crackled suddenly on my desk, scaring me so bad I almost pulled the trigger. No voice came through, just static and what sounded like heavy breathing. I backed into the corner, keeping the rifle pointed at the window. It got so cold that ice was forming inside the glass, in July, at only 4,000 feet up. My hands went numb around the rifle even though I kept trying to warm them up. At 3:17 a.m., according to my watch, the weather stripping tore off. I heard it rip away with a soft sound, then felt pressure against the glass itself. The window started to bend inward with force, pushing on all 4 corners at once, like it had more arms than anything should have. The glass made a squealing noise as it bent too far. Small cracks started at the edges and spread inward every second. I didn't think, I fired. The gun blast was deafening in the small room. The window burst outward in pieces of glass that shined in the darkness. A sound answered, high-pitched and sharp, unlike anything I'd ever heard from any animal. It started as a screech but turned into something worse, a weird wail that changed in ways no human voice could make. Then it got quiet again, with just the soft tinkling of glass pieces falling from the window frame. I kept the rifle aimed at the now open window, waiting for something to come through the darkness. Nothing did. No more sounds came from outside. The weird cold even started to go away, with the temperature getting closer to normal for a summer night. I stayed put, my muscles cramping and eyes burning from staring so long. My hands stayed locked on the rifle, finger next to the trigger, ready to shoot again if anything moved. Hours went by like this until I couldn't see straight anymore. The sky outside the broken window got a tiny bit lighter as morning started coming. I still kept watch, fighting the tired feeling that was taking over. My last clear memory was hearing birds starting to sing again in the forest below, normal sounds coming back like none of this weird stuff had happened. The rifle felt super heavy in my hands. I tried to blink away the sandy feeling in my eyes, but each blink got longer than the one before. The last thing I saw was sunlight hitting the eastern sky through the broken window, pieces of glass catching the light across the porch outside. Then I passed out, still holding onto the rifle as I fell asleep. A knock woke me up. I opened my eyes. The sun coming through the broken window was too bright at first. Broken glass was all over the floor. I was still holding the rifle, pointing it at the empty window frame. "James, you in there? Open up." Dan Mitchell's voice came from outside the door, accompanied by more knocking. I struggled to my feet, muscles screaming from hours spent in the same position. My watch read 8:43 a.m. "Coming," I called, my voice hoarse. I set the rifle aside and stumbled to the door, pushing away the makeshift barricade I'd created. The deadbolt stuck for a moment before sliding back with a metallic scrape. I pulled the door open to find Dan standing on the porch. His expression changed from concern to shock as he took in my appearance. "Jesus, Wilson, you look like hell." Dan stepped past me into the tower, immediately looking at the broken window. His eyes moved around the room, noticing the shell casing on the floor, the flipped-over furniture, and then back to me. "What happened here?" he asked, gesturing toward the broken glass. I rubbed my face, trying to organize my thoughts. "Something tried to get in last night, same as the night before, but worse. It was working on that window, pulling out the weather stripping. I fired before it could get through." Dan looked unhappy, walking over to examine the window frame. "You fired your weapon?" "Yes. It was breaking in." "What was breaking in exactly?" I tried to find words that wouldn't sound crazy. "I don't know. Something big. The same thing that left those tracks I told you about over the radio." Dan's face got serious. "Right. The tracks." He looked around the tower again. "We lost radio contact with you yesterday evening. No response to the morning check-in either. When you didn't answer the emergency channel, I decided to drive up early instead of waiting for the supply run." He picked up a piece of glass between his fingers, looking at it before letting it fall. "So, you're saying you shot at something that was trying to break into your tower?" "Yes. Look at the window frame," I insisted. "See those marks? Whatever it was working systematically at the seals. This wasn't a bear or any animal. It knew exactly what it was doing." Dan walked to the window and ran his fingers along the deep gouges in the wood. His face didn't show anything. You couldn't tell if he believed it or not. "When's the last time you slept properly, James?" "That's not relevant." I moved to the desk where I'd left the photographs. I documented everything. The footprints, the scratches on the support beams. "Let me take a look outside," Dan interrupted, already heading for the door. "Stay here." I watched through the broken window as Dan walked around the tower below, taking his time looking at the ground. A few minutes later, he came back up the stairs and walked in with a new look on his face, like he was pleased with himself, almost cocky. "Mystery solved," he announced. "You shot a deer." "What?" "There's blood on the ground below the window. Trail leads into the forest. Must have been a decent-sized buck approaching the tower. Probably curious about the light. You panicked and fired." I stared at him. "It wasn't a deer. I know what I saw." "And what exactly did you see, James? Because your radio transmission mentioned something with 18-inch footprints that speaks with human voices. That sound reasonable to you?" "I know how it sounds," I said. "But there's blood? You found actual blood?" "Yes. And broken branches where it ran off into the trees after you shot it. Classic deer behavior." Something felt wrong. Dan's tone, his certainty, the way he stood. He looked too stiff, like he was standing weird. "I want to see," I said. "No need. I've seen enough tracking blood trails in my 20 years with the Forest Service. What you need is sleep." He glanced at my rifle, then back to me. "And maybe some time off. Isolation can mess with your head, make you see threats that aren't there." I walked over to the desk where I'd left my camera. "I have photos of the footprints from yesterday morning, after the first night." "Rain washes away a lot of evidence," Dan said dismissively. "Look, I can help clean up this mess, replace that window before the next storm." His offer seemed reasonable, but something about it made me suspicious. Dan had never helped much with maintenance issues before, always talking about budget constraints and proper channels. "I'll handle it," I replied, studying him carefully. Dan blinked, once closing and opening his eyes a bit too slowly. I noticed his eyes didn't move naturally. They moved in exact steps rather than the tiny unconscious movements human eyes make. "You need rest," he said again. "I'm concerned about your state of mind. Firing a weapon at wildlife is a serious violation of protocol." That's when I noticed his watch. Dan always wore his watch on his left wrist, had for the entire 3 years I'd known him. Today it sat on his right wrist, the face turned inward rather than outward. I spotted other small things that felt wrong. His Forest Service badge was pinned slightly higher than regulation. The way he stood leaned on his right leg, when Dan had always stood with his weight equally distributed or slightly leaned on his left after an old knee injury. And what really stood out, he hadn't said a single word about the fire activity he'd reported yesterday, the very reason he couldn't send anyone to look into my claims right away. "How are the fires on Reynolds Ridge?" I asked casually, reaching slowly for my rifle without breaking eye contact. "Under control," he answered without hesitation. Another warning sign hit me. Dan would have given specifics, containment percentages, crew positions, estimated time to full control. Details mattered to him. "Let me help clean up," he said again, moving toward the broken window. "You get some sleep. When you wake up, we can discuss your situation, maybe arrange some time off." I watched as he stepped carefully around the glass pieces on the floor, moving in a way that seemed off, like someone copying actions they'd seen rather than things they'd done 1,000 times. But what really made me sure was how he completely ignored the deep claw marks in the tower's support beams, scratches running all the way up the wooden columns, easy to see from where he stood. No supervisor would ignore damage that bad. No human would stay quiet about marks that looked like they came from claws as big as knives. My hand closed around the rifle. "Dan," I said slowly, "what's happening here?" He turned toward me, his face changed into something I couldn't read. Not really surprise, not really anger, but like he was trying his best to copy a human feeling. "You're confused, James. Exhausted. Let me help you." "Stop saying that," I demanded, raising the rifle slightly. "Tell me what's happening." Dan backed up toward the door, moving in a strange way that didn't seem normal. His face stayed blank as he reached for the doorknob behind him. "You should put the gun down, James." "Answer me." My voice cracked with the force of the shout. Dan's head tilted at an angle that made my skin crawl. For just a moment, so brief I might have imagined it, his pupils got so big his eyes looked completely black. "I'll come back when you're feeling more reasonable," he said, voice perfectly modulated. "We can discuss your options then." He backed up to the door, still staring at me hard. He reached behind him and grabbed the doorknob without even looking. "I'll check the generator while I'm here," Dan said, his voice oddly flat. "Might explain your radio problems." I watched through the broken window as he went down the outside stairs, moving with that strange mechanical way I'd noticed earlier. Something about how he moved seemed planned out, like he was thinking about each step instead of just walking normally. The moment he went around the back of the tower, I spotted something I'd missed before, dark stains on the heels of his boots. Not mud, blood. I quickly grabbed my rifle and ammunition. If that wasn't Dan, and I was pretty sure it wasn't, I needed to know what happened to the real Dan Mitchell. I had only minutes before whatever was pretending to be my supervisor came back. I went quickly and quietly down the stairs, staying under the windows so I wouldn't be seen from above. The morning air felt cool on my face after how stuffy the tower was. The birds had gone quiet, making everything around the clearing weirdly silent. Instead of going toward the generator where Dan had gone, I went the opposite way, toward the eastern line of trees, where I'd first seen that strange figure days ago. My boots left clear tracks in the morning dew, but I couldn't worry about that now. The trees got thicker around me, branches catching on my clothes as I made my way deeper in. I found what I was looking for almost right away. A path of messed up plants leading away from the tower. Broken twigs, bent ferns, and spots of something dark on leaves made a clear trail. As I followed these signs, all sound in the forest stopped. No birds making noise, no insects buzzing. Even the usual sound of wind through the pine needles seemed to stop, leaving everything completely silent in a way that made me feel watched. The trail of trampled plants led to a small clearing where the ground was all torn up. Dark spots covered the dirt and nearby plants. Blood, and way too much to be from any deer. The soil was soaked with it, almost black in places, with drag marks leading deeper into the trees. I looked back toward the tower, now barely visible through the trees. No sign of anyone moving. I kept going, following the drag marks, with my finger next to the trigger of my rifle. Something pale was stuck on a branch at shoulder height. A piece of fabric, khaki with a dark green stripe, standard issue Forest Service uniform. My mouth went dry as I saw more torn clothing scattered along the path. 20 yards further, something was lying in the bushes. At first I thought it was a thrown-away work glove, covered in dirt. Then I saw the fingernails. A human hand, torn off at the wrist, palm up like it was reaching. The skin already looked waxy, like dead flesh, but the watch was still running, face turned outward, worn on the left hand. Dan's watch. I fought back the urge to throw up, forcing myself to keep going forward. The blood trail ended at a shallow dip under a fallen tree, partly covered with hastily piled branches and forest junk. I used my rifle barrel to push aside the covering and saw what was underneath. What used to be Dan Mitchell stared up with empty eye sockets, jaw hanging open in a way that wasn't right. I only knew it was him because of the Forest Service badge still pinned to what was left of his shirt and his special belt buckle. A silver trout he'd won at a fishing tournament years ago. The body looked used. That was the only word I could think of. The skin hung loose in places, stretched and torn in others, like something had been inside it, wearing it like a costume before tossing it aside for a better fit. The chest was torn open with no organs inside. It hit me hard what I was seeing. Dan hadn't just been killed. He'd been harvested. The thing in the tower wasn't just acting like Dan. It was wearing him. And I'd left it alone at my tower. I turned and ran, not caring about the noise I made. Branches hit my face as I crashed through the bushes, trying to get back before whatever was pretending to be Dan decided to add me to its collection. I came out of the trees, breathing hard, with the tower now clearly visible across the small clearing. The door at the top of the stairs was open, swinging a little in the breeze. Fresh blood was smeared on the wooden steps, making a trail that went from the tower down to the ground and disappeared into the trees on the opposite side of the clearing. Dan was gone. I was horrified by what I'd found, but felt better knowing the thing was gone. I went up the stairs carefully with my rifle ready, following the blood trail with my eyes. It went away from the tower, toward the north trail, the main path down the mountain that eventually led to the ranger station. As I climbed the stairs, the blood told me what happened. Whatever was pretending to be Dan had come into the tower while I was gone, moved around inside, then left and went down the mountain. The blood marks looked weird in some spots, like they were put there on purpose instead of just dripping. I got to the top of the stairs and looked inside. The tower looked normal except for one thing. My camera was gone from the desk where I'd left it. The photos of the footprints and claw marks were gone too. My radio was sitting in the middle of the desk, turned on, with the channel set to emergency broadcast. It was just making static, but someone had turned the volume all the way up. The noise was really loud in the small room. I turned it off and stood in the sudden quiet, trying to make sense of everything. The real Dan Mitchell was dead, his body cut up and left in the forest. Something was now looking just like him, had taken my evidence, and was heading down the mountain toward people. And I was alone at the top of Baker Peak with a broken window, not many supplies left, and knowing the thing would come back, either looking like Dan or someone new. I stood in the quiet of my broken-into tower, mind racing with one clear thought: I had to get off this mountain. I knew it right away. I couldn't stay here. The tower wasn't safe. I had maybe an hour of daylight left, but waiting until morning meant spending another night alone with that broken window. I grabbed my backpack and emptied it on the bed, my hands shaking. I needed to travel light, but prepared. I stuffed in a first aid kit, water bottle, protein bars, flashlight, matches, and my hunting knife. My watch read 4:27 p.m. If I pushed hard, I might reach the ranger station by midnight. I changed into my strongest hiking boots and put on a long-sleeved shirt under my jacket even though it was summer. The forest would be cold after dark. I loaded my rifle and counted my remaining ammunition. 26 rounds. The single spent shell casing from last night lay where it had fallen by the window. With one last look around the small space that had been my home for 3 seasons, I went down the stairs, rifle ready. The clearing around the tower felt open and exposed. I checked the ground for fresh tracks, but found only the boot prints from earlier, mine and Dan's. I still couldn't make myself think of that thing as human. The main trail down the mountain was the fastest route, wide, well-kept, and direct. It was also the most predictable path, which made it dangerous. Whatever was wearing Dan's skin would know I'd likely use it to escape. I turned east instead, toward a maintenance path that connected to an old logging road. The route was longer and rougher, but less obvious. I disappeared into the dense forest as I left the clearing behind. After 10 minutes at a steady pace, I paused to catch my breath and get my bearings. Baker Peak rose behind me, my fire tower now hidden by trees. The main path to the ranger station would take me northwest, but I planned to continue east for another mile before cutting north through a ravine that would eventually reconnect with the road about 7 miles down. The first hour passed in tense silence. I moved as quickly as the terrain allowed, staying low and pausing often to listen. The forest seemed unusually quiet, fewer birds than normal, no small animals moving through bushes. The sun got lower behind the mountains. I tripped over exposed roots, caught myself on tree trunks, and forced myself to keep a steady pace even though I was getting tired. Every snapping twig made me freeze. Every distant sound had me raising my rifle. What I'd seen, Dan's empty body, the thing wearing his skin, made each step harder. The light dimmed as the sun disappeared completely. I briefly thought about using my flashlight, but decided against it. Better to move slowly in darkness than show my position with light. My eyes adjusted enough to make out the general path, though details were lost in shadow. After another hour of careful progress through increasingly difficult terrain, I reached the ravine I'd been aiming for. It ran steeply down the mountain, with loose rock and fallen trees along the way. In daylight, it would have been challenging. In the growing darkness, it was dangerous. I half climbed, half slid down the steepest sections, using trees and rocks for balance. My hands got raw from grabbing at rough bark and stone. Twice I lost my footing completely, sliding several feet before catching myself. The rifle banged painfully against my back with each stumble. The ravine finally leveled out into a narrow valley. According to my mental map, I'd covered about 5 miles from the tower. Another 5 miles of easier terrain would bring me to the main road, where I might find help from passing vehicles. A crunch of boots on gravel ahead stopped me cold. I dropped into a crouch behind a fallen log, rifle ready. The sound came again, deliberate footsteps moving up the valley toward me. I thumbed off the safety, my mouth dry with fear. A beam of light swept across the trees, a flashlight. The footsteps slowed, careful. "Hello?" A male voice called. "Forest Service. Anyone out there?" I recognized the voice. Ryan Campbell, one of the park rangers who patrolled this sector. I felt so relieved I almost got lightheaded. I wanted to call out, but I stopped myself. After what happened with Dan, I couldn't just trust what I was seeing. The light got closer. I could see Ryan's outline now with his ranger hat and uniform. He walked like he knew these woods inside out. "I know someone's there," he called. "I can see your tracks in the mud. Identify yourself." I took a deep breath. "Ryan, it's James Wilson from Baker Peak Lookout." The light swung toward my hiding place, momentarily blinding me. "James, what the hell are you doing out here after dark?" I stood slowly, keeping my rifle pointed down but ready. Something happened at the tower. Dan Mitchell is dead. Ryan lowered his flashlight slightly, moving closer. "Dead? What happened?" "It's complicated," I said, watching him carefully. "I found his body in the woods. Something was pretending to be him." Ryan's face came into focus as he got closer. There was no smile now. His expression was serious, concerned, but looked human in a way Dan hadn't been. "Slow down," he said, raising a hand. "You're saying Mitchell is dead? Have you called this in?" "Radio's not working," I said. "I'm trying to reach the station to report it." Ryan nodded, reaching for the radio on his shoulder. "I'll call it in now. Stay where you are." As he raised the radio to his mouth, his eyes suddenly fixed on something behind me. His expression changed in an instant from concern to recognition, then to naked fear. The radio dropped from his hand. His right arm moved to his sidearm. "Run," he whispered, eyes never leaving whatever he saw on the trail behind me. "Don't look back. Just run." Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to see what had caused that reaction. I fought the urge. Ryan's face told me everything I needed to know. "Go! Now!" he shouted, drawing his weapon in one fluid motion. I ran. Pure panic pushed me forward as I crashed through bushes and jumped over fallen logs. Behind me, 3 gunshots split the air one after another. A pause, then 2 more. Then a scream came from where I'd left Ryan, high-pitched and weird in a way no human could make. The sound followed me down the mountain, going up and down like some strange siren. I ran until my lungs hurt and my legs felt ready to give out. The ground got steeper, forcing me to slow down or risk a bad fall. I had no idea if I was still on a path or just running through the woods. I didn't care which way I went anymore. I just wanted to get away from that awful scream. Trees became fewer as I got to the bottom of the mountain. I saw things I recognized now. This was close to where the maintenance road joined the main forest road. I was getting closer to people. My foot caught on a hidden root and I fell down a short hill. I landed hard on my side, with the rifle underneath me. I lay there trying to catch my breath. When I finally got to my feet, I saw it. The main road, about 50 yards ahead. I limped toward it, using the rifle to help me walk. The road was empty when I reached it. No headlights either way. I didn't know what time it was. My watch broke in the fall, but it felt like early morning when not many cars would be around. I had a choice, wait for a car or keep moving. Staying still felt too dangerous. I turned right and began walking, keeping to the edge of the road. Each step hurt badly. My right ankle was probably sprained, but I kept moving, thinking about Ryan's face when he saw what was behind me. I'm not sure how long I walked. The sky started to get lighter. Morning was coming. Headlights appeared behind me. I stepped further off the road, ready to wave the vehicle down. As it got closer, I could see it was a pickup truck. When I tried to raise my arm to stop the truck, I couldn't stay standing. My knees gave out, and I fell to the ground. I heard tires skid on the road, a car door opening, footsteps running toward me. "Oh my God, are you hurt? Can you hear me?" A woman's voice. Hands gently turned me over. A face came into focus, worried eyes, hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked like she knew what to do in a crisis, cool and in control. "Help," I managed to say. "Please." "I'm Sarah," she said, already checking me for serious injuries. "Sarah Thompson, I'm going to get you to help, okay?" She helped me to her truck, almost carrying my weight. The rifle caught her attention, but she didn't comment. She guided me into the passenger seat and buckled me in like a child. "The ranger station," I mumbled as she started the engine. "Need to tell them." "That's where I'm taking you," she assured me. "Just stay with me. It's about 20 minutes away." I fought to stay conscious as the truck drove down the mountain road. Sarah kept looking over, asking questions to keep me awake. My name, where I'd come from, what happened. I gave short answers, unable to put the terrible experience into words. The ranger station came into view up ahead, a wooden building with some official trucks parked out front. Sarah pulled up to the entrance and ran inside for help. 2 rangers came out with her, rushing to the truck. "It's Wilson from Baker Peak," one said, recognizing me despite my condition. They carried me inside and put me on a cot in the first aid room. Everyone was asking questions. What happened? Where was Dan Mitchell? Had I seen Ryan Campbell? The room spun, faces blurred, and I passed out. I spent 3 days in the county hospital. I had physical exhaustion, dehydration, a sprained ankle, and lots of cuts and bruises. The doctors worried more about my mental state and kept asking what had happened on the mountain. I told them everything. The weird figure I first saw near the tower, the thing that tried to break in, Dan Mitchell's mangled body, what happened with Ryan. They listened with a look that told me they didn't really believe me. Search teams found no sign of Ryan Campbell. No blood, no shell casings, no tracks beyond his vehicle parked at a trailhead 3 miles from where I'd run into him. They found the tower just like I said. Broken window, bloodstains on the steps, signs of a struggle, but nothing that explained what caused it. They started dismissing my story as crazy talk from an isolated lookout who'd lost it. Then records showed the real Dan Mitchell had missed his check-in 3 days before he supposedly visited my tower. The same day I first spotted something weird at the tree line. The investigation got bigger. Teams searched where I said I found Dan's body, but summer storms had washed away any evidence. The tower stayed empty as authorities tried to figure out what happened to 2 missing Forest Service employees and why I had such a wild story. I gave my statement, went through psychological evaluation, and got released with a recommendation for trauma counseling. The Forest Service offered leave until the investigation finished. I said no. I quit that same day. I moved to Seattle and rented a small apartment on the 6th floor of a downtown building. I found work as a night security guard. I saw the irony, but the quiet felt familiar and even comfortable. I never went back to Olympic National Forest. Most nights I slept okay, tired from working long hours and going to therapy, where I slowly learned to talk about what happened without sounding crazy. I made progress, building back a normal life bit by bit. But when thunderstorms came in from the Pacific, I sometimes woke up in my dark bedroom, feeling scared, sure I'd heard scratching at my windows. I told myself it was just branches, wind-blown stuff, normal city apartment sounds. But there were no trees tall enough to reach the 6th floor.